So before I start talking about the build on the 6 LED transmission, there was a young gentleman that's recently here on TikTok that was given 24 months to live due to finding out that he had cancer. What he stated was that most of us put ourselves out on social media to be heard and seen when we're no longer here. And I agree with that. So I'm gonna dedicate this video to him, and let's get started. Take the rear support bushing and drive it into the case. It is nice, smooth, flat, and level. Next, I will drive the new bushing from the Sonnax Bushing Kit that I'm getting. If I'm not using Sonnax, then I'm using Durabond into the internal ring gear with output shaft. Drive it down flush. Still needs to go a little bit further. There is a step on the bearing that rides here. Just a little bit, not too far. When installing the bushing on the 123/435R clutch hub, this drum here, the inner hub itself needs to be supported. I use a low roller of a 4L60 underneath it so we don't damage or break the weld and crack the drum. The bushings on the center support on the 2635R clutch hub side, this bushing needs to be Loctited into the center support. Usually I see it walking out, and I've been recently Loctiting it back into the case, back into the center support, and it goes down flush. Press it all the way down. Flip the center support down to the lower and reverse clutch side. Support the bottom by a large socket. That way you're not pressing on the outside. You just stepped down in, press the bushing in. Down flush. The bushing for the 2635R clutch hub needs to go down flush, and we need to recess this one on the inner side. It has perforated holes that are in the bushing for the Sonnax kit, but the Durabond kit does not. Pay attention to your part numbers that come along with the kits individually, and as you do them, drop that. Just a little bit. To confirm this, you can take the bearing and put it on the top side of the clutch hub and see if it rides correctly. I'm going to go just a little bit further. I confirm that it's down all the way. This is the bushing for the other side. We're going to push it down flat and flush first. Then we're going to take and recess the bushing. Right back where it was. At this point, I'm going to take the center support and I'm going to take the clutch hub and test fit it to make sure we don't have any issues. Next, we're going to install the bushings on the stator support. This one's down flush. This bushing on the stator support, I'll push down flush and recess it just slightly. Go a little further, just like that. Lastly, on the input shaft with 456 clutch hub, we're going to drive that last bushing in nice and flush. For two-wheel drive units, the Durabond bushing kit comes for the two-wheel drive units, but does not come with the four-wheel drive with the Sonnax kit. It's the last one you'll have to push in if it is two-wheel drive versus four-wheel drive. Push it in flat. Also, on both clutch hubs, make sure that the bushings are seated and flush and you don't have any issues, because I have seen some issues with the bushings being an issue, and if I have an extra set, I have an extra set. Just always make sure it can move freely. Now we're going to move on to the case. Park rod actuator arm sleeve. Replace the two O-rings on it, lubricate them before you install it into the case. going to take and pull the park pawl arm and lock it. Hold it down. You have to lubricate this side. Line it up. Get a little tappy. Grab the roll pin. It's not that roll pin, it's a different roll pin. Make sure this is straight up and down. There we go. Grab the pin back in the case. We're going to take and install the shift shaft seal into the case. Next we're going to install the park rod actuator assembly into the case and the shift shaft. The other two pins that I have are for this section. Make sure it's all the way in. A little tappy. Alright, we're going to line up those holes. Just like that. This one's the one that goes in the case side. This is the one that goes in between the shift shaft sleeve and the park rod actuator. Drive this roll pin in first. And then we're going to take and drive this one in last. The last roll pin that we're going to install into the case. Just like that. Install the bearing into the case with the outer race cage down first. Then we're going to take the output shaft and install it into the case. Check that it rotates freely. The next thing we're going to install into the case is the thickest bearing in the output planetary. I know you can assemble this all as one piece and put a threaded rod in it. You can do it that way, but this is for assembly purposes only. For the center support, this is the bearing that needs to go on top of the sun gear in the output planet. Now before we fully assemble the center support section, the low sprag assembly, I've got a new Borg Warner sprag assembly in it, and there's the one you need. We're going to assemble the low and reverse piston first and lubricate the center support on the inside as well. So you can lubricate the piston, the inner side seal, and through here. This section rides into this section. And the outside of the seal. The O-ring that goes underneath the low sprag assembly, make sure you lubricate it up and walk it down very carefully and make sure you don't cut it. We're going to talk about the spring next. So there are two springs in this transmission that are almost identical. There is one for the balance piston on the 1, 2, 3, 4 piston, and the one for the low and reverse piston are almost the same. The one for the low and reverse piston is flatter. Goes right there. There is a identification mark here on the inner race of the low sprag. Now when you assemble this, if you need to know, Counterclockwise rotate, locks in the clockwise position. You'll install it into the open grooves in the center of the center support. Then you press it down, put the snap ring on. When you press down on the low sprag, do not push here on the outer edge. You push down into the center line. And then install the snap ring to the open ID location here. I do apologize, this open ID location here. I found it easier to take your pick or scribe and walk the snap ring all the way around until it seats. Make sure that this snap ring seats all the way. Just like that. Let's install the 2/6 clutch piston. Lubricate the center support itself. And then the piston seal. Install it into the center support. The 2/6 clutch piston return spring with the bevel side facing down. I take this one section of the center support towards the back side where I'm going to locate the snap ring. Alright, in the next session, in order to install this snap ring, there are very different variations on how people do this. They use a 4L60 sun shell that has the teeth flared out to press down on that return spring, or the apply ring for the 3.5R. How I've always done it: flat blade screwdriver and a hammer. Just be easy. Seat it down, walk it around.
That's 6 3/4 of a house. Oh, it's still bent pretty good. I guess I made it look pretty good. I can fix that.
Now at this point you want to make sure that you go all the way around to make sure that that snap ring is seated all the way. Now we're going to install the low and reverse clutch assembly. I have already pre-measured all of my steels and my frictions to figure out what my clearance is. I'm not going to go through all of that. Please consult a manual for service information, and I have plenty of videos going over clutch clearances that you can revert back to by using the hashtag 6L80 through this platform. I'm going to start with the weight spring, then steel, friction, and so forth. And last but not least, the backing plate. Install the snap ring. How you check that clearance is actually before you assemble all of this. I do it completely dry before the sprag is installed. Next, we're going to work on the 2/6 clutch. We're going to do the same here and start with our return or cushion spring, then a steel, friction, steel, friction, steel, friction, steel, friction, steel, friction, backing plate. Install the snap ring closed in towards the back of these two opening points. There's not a bevel on this snap ring. Next, we're going to take and air test the 2/6 clutch and then low in reverse. That air bleed lets off any air that's within the clutch pack or behind the piston, so it doesn't have a drain back concern. Install it into the case. Make sure it's all the way down below the bevel section where the center support snap ring is going to go next. Next, we're going to take the center support snap ring and locate it at the 9 o'clock position within the case.
You gave him the option to do one side or both sides. Him and his cousin holding it together.
Make sure that you go back. Make sure it is fully seated. All the way around. Next, we're going to install the clutch hubs and the bearings into the case. This one here has a lip that goes on top of the center support. We're going to take our 2635R clutch hub, lubricate it up, no dry bushings. And install it into the center support. Spline it into the 2.6 clutch. Make sure it is all the way down. Next, we're going to go after the 1, 2, 3, 4 clutch hub. And we're going to install this bearing into the case. And install the clutch hub. Make sure that it is all the way down. It's almost flush with the next one. Next, we're going to assemble the 456 clutch dampener. This is going to be with the bevel side on the top side. Install the backing plate. And then install the snap ring. So I know that some people have seen that certain ones do not have this installed into it. This is a vibration and noise dampener within the transmission. Sure the snap ring is all the way seated. Then we're going to install this bearing into that clutch hub and install this clutch hub all the way down. And don't forget this bearing. Next, we'll be assembling the input shaft of 456 clutch hub, and we will assemble this with the Sonnax heavy duty clutch apply piston, apply plate, and backing plate. Now onto the 456 clutch assembly. We'll start with the piston. Now, why I've used this and I've explained it in the past is, if anybody wants to go tow a boat, go tow a boat. Don't matter to me. She will hold up, and I don't have to worry about the friction coning. We're going to get tuning along with this as well. All of these units get tuned. Install the piston. I'm going to lube the outside first. Install the return spring. Lube up the fluid dam. You install it, press it down, and install a new snap ring. When you install the fluid dam, make sure that you do not cut the seal. Make sure it goes down nice and even, and it holds. We're going to put new seals on the back side next after we assemble this. Where is my snap ring? Move my snap ring. And release. Next is the 456 clutch assembly. Start with the apply plate. Now, what I want to see on this is 60 thousandths clearance, cushion spring, steel, friction, steel, friction, steel, friction, steel, friction, steel. friction steel, friction, not that backing plate, this backing plate. Now Troy told me something once upon a time, if you take a look at the backing plate and see if it's below or right at where the ring land for the snap ring rides, you're pretty much close. Some of that is true with this unit, some of it is not. I still always check them. Pretty much no 60 thousandths. Alright, new tools, who dis? Got some stuff from Adapticate, just because I like nice tools and they work pretty good. I've used them on the last 2 units that I have built. Some lube on the seal. I'm gonna press it down, size it out. And go all the way down, quick as you can to the bottom. It'll start to shrink just a little bit. Do that to all 3. Pretty sure this may be of use to push the seals down, but I'd rather walk it down by hand. All right, large open section first. Let's see, +5. Line the seals up. It's been a bit finicky. I'll go walk it around like this sometimes to try to shrink it down if it does oversize too much. Make sure they're level and straight. Readjust that seal just a little bit. Just like that. I'm gonna let it sit for about 5 minutes. While we wait, let's go ahead and look at this. You have to add like 5 pounds of pressure on top of it. I'm just gonna press it down till I can't anymore. Zero it out. Release it and apply the clutch. About 55. That's still well within the window. Closer to 60 thousandths is what I kind of want to see. I know if I go to a thinner snap ring, I may have way more than that. So that's acceptable range, right at 55. My feel for clearance is pretty dang close. What do you think? Next, we're going to install the bearing. We're going to take and put some trans gel on our plastic washer shim that goes underneath the front planet. Install the front planet. Install the sun gear. Install the input shaft clutch hub. And make sure it's down. We want to feel that. Now we're going to assemble the 123-435R drum. In this overhaul kit, you need to pay attention to the seals that are in here. There is one seal that you will not use. It's 2 outer seals, and you will have 2 seals that are the same and one is not. This is going to be for the dam. This is the one you will not need. These 3 seals go into the inner hub section of the drum. First, we're going to start with the large O-ring. It goes here. Next, there are two lands that are within the drum. One is going to be held for the snap ring that is the upper land, and below it is where the O-ring goes. So the O-ring that needs to be installed there. Also, just in case if you ever get some of your seals mixed up, this ring right here can be mistaken for the pump slide O-ring seal. They are actually two different sizes. Shows down on the bottom land, and then you'll have a D-ring seal that will go here. Sure it is all the way around. Next, we'll install the 3/5R piston. This is the apply piston. Install the D-ring. We'll go ahead and lubricate our inner seals, as well as the drum. This is the section where the D-ring on the apply piston seats to. Make sure everything is well lubricated. We don't need to cut anything, and it makes it a lot easier for ease of use and installation. Same here. And I'm going to go ahead and do the inside. Two other seals that ride within this piston. They will be on the fluid dam section. Install it first into the drum. Next, you'll install the return spring with the bevel side faced up towards the fluid dam. We're going to install the seals on the lower section of the dam, the outer section, and one here. Going to lubricate these O-rings as well and compress it into the drum. As well as the inner side of the piston or the dam. We'll take the fluid dam, install it, make sure it is even. You need to cut anything that's going to make it for ease of installation. Right here, second one from the end. And press it down. Just like that. New snap ring. This one gets a bit tricky as well. Alright, so I have the snap ring started down on one section, and I'm going to take and walk the snap ring down. Don't you no. Make sure it's seated. Make sure it is seated. I've seen where it can potentially not seat all the way if the fluid dam is not all the way down. That's why it takes a good bit of pressure. Alright, let's install the Sonnax Billet forward piston, 1, 2, 3, 4 piston. Take and lube the outside because we're going to install the return spring and the fluid dam next. And new snap ring. Lubricate the bushing. Alright, before we get into that, here we go. Return spring. Fluid dam. Lubricate the seals. Install it. Just like the 4/5/6 piston dam, we need to make sure that it seats in correctly and we do not cut any seals. And by the way, you can install this upside down. Don't do that. Next, snap ring. Sure it's seated all the way. It's all the way down. Now let's assemble the drum. There is an ID mark that is flat all the way across on this side and 180 degrees out at the top for the 3/5R snap ring. That's only from manufacturing, but you line up all the frictions and steels, well, not the frictions, but just the steels in line as you would all the way up. So cushion spring, steel, and alternate friction steel, friction steel. Last friction, and then the backing plate with these markings straight up. Install the snap ring right there. Okay, now the apply ring fits down all the way down between the fingers, all the way down. And the 3/5R, we're going to do the same. Cushion spring, steel, friction steel, friction steel, friction steel, backing plate. Take and rotate the drum 180 degrees and locate the snap ring. Now there are different thicknesses on the snap rings on the 1, 2, 3, 4 and the 3/5R. I've already measured to make sure that the steels and the frictions are exactly what came out of it to figure out our clearance. If you get this too tight, or the 4/5/6, you'll have a bind up on the initial test drive. It's a clutch purge system that is built in with the Tecum to purge all of the air out of certain clutch packs during certain shifts. Now, one very important part of the drum, it comes in an overhaul kit. There is a seal that is here on the bearing that rides on the top side of the drum, and that is for your compensator feed. Comes with a new one. I would recommend replacing it. Take and press it in. I have the center of the drum and the bottom supported. Just like that. Install the drum. Little jiggle jiggle. Make sure it's all the way down. Now on to the bell housing pump section. Usually when I get a new one that is even just brand new from GM, I will go over it on the coarse side and on the fine side just to make sure I don't have any high spots or any cross leaks or anything, and just take a look at that. So first thing we're going to do is lubricate the pump pocket. We're going to put the slide in. We'll take and put the seal first. Then I'm going to take some green trans gel on the Teflon seal side. Install it into the slide. Install it into the bell housing. Then you have a wiper seal and a cushion seal. Install it next. I'm going to take the pivot pin, I'm going to take and pull over, line that up. Press the pivot pin all the way in. Next, slide spring. All the way down. You take the rotor, 2 vane rings, and your plastic washer shim. There's only one way it can go in. Put a little bit of trans gel to hold it here. Place it into the pump pocket. At this point you're going to install the vanes. Install them long ways down into the ring side. Let me put the last ring on last after they're all in. I'm going to fix that here in just a second. I'm going to put them in and readjust them. There we go. They're all down flat. And then the ring. Then we have 2 new seals for the cooler line section. I'm going to drive them in. All the way in flush. Now you have your tap plug. Goes here in the bell housing. We're going to take and tighten that down with an 11mm socket. Just right back where it was. Not too deep. Alright, let's talk about these gaskets. So there's a lot of these different types that are floating around out there, new designs, however they want to do it. These are a lot thicker. Some people have had issues with them. I don't use them. It changes your end play as well, so do be careful of that. I've already caught the last one that I built. They used that gasket, and I had to change to the paper Transtech gasket. It'll never fail. On the stator tube has an O-ring. Comes an overhaul kit. Gasket only goes one way. There you go. Let's go get the pump body. There we go. Let me lubricate that first. Put it in here. There as well. Can you feel it? There it is. Alright, flip it over. This is very crucial. Blue Loctite on the bolts and 89 inch-pounds. We'll speed the rest of them down. Not too far. We're going to get into pump modifications using the Sonnax LB1 and the PR valve. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take and modify the balance side and the back side of the valve. We're going to take and block the balance hole. I'll come to the side right here. I'm going to drive it in and go a little bit further. All the way down. Shouldn't see any issues there. Now we're going to drill a hole. So what we're doing with this modification is changing where the balance oil is fed into the end lands. So normally where that valve is worn out right there, balance pressure is actually fed directly on top of it, which pushes the valve into the bore and cocks it sideways and causes that to happen. So we're going to change where we're putting it. Top section where the balance feed is, we're going to go directly across. Let me get my stake, hang on. Center punch. We're going to pin it right there. Be careful when doing this. You can break a drill bit. Nice and easy. There's something wrong with this bit. It's not even going anywhere. honestly think that there should be a jig. To support this dang thing. And how many times out of how many have broken that I've gone through for that. I understand what everybody's put out there on how to fix this issue and support everything, but still, when it gets there, it breaks. Almost got you. Come on. Easy, easy. Keep breaking. Night. Easy, easy. It's through. Had to try again. These are the things that we run into. And I know what's probably going to come into the comment section. Grill press, angle press. Oh God, come on. I'm going to get you back out now. This is when shit actually goes south. And we got to figure out what to do. This is pretty shitty.
What?
The last couple of pumps that I've modified with this setup, the last one I went through like 3 drill bits. Luckily I had extras.
Yeah.
And they'll get to the end and then snap off. And this one didn't even start, like the end of the drill bit's dull to try to get the angle. So I went to a smaller size and went to a smaller size than that. And both of those got to the edge and snapped. So I've been sitting here trying to drive it on home through the other side.
Well, that sounds like a blast.
Well, Jim's talked about it and how to fix it or keep it from happening. So I've tried to take care when I'm holding down in and I'm going straight. It's either that or the head of this is just not straight centered.
Straight, yeah.
All right, beyond that, we're going to reinstall the OEM boost spring in our LB1 setup. It's the largest boost valve on the market. Reinstall the pin. Now you vacuum test. Now that we've got that under wraps, we'll lubricate this one section right quick and install it onto the pump. Get the alignment dowel pin that's there. Alright, so some people use a centering ring. I have always eyeballed this and just felt right here where it's going to be flat and flush, and when it's not. Is it going to grab? Is it going to be straight? Right out there. Let's get the bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Come back. Make sure everything feels and looks good, because it will move. There. Here we go. Right there. And tighten one. That's our alignment. Now the pump's down flush. All right, let's torque them down. 72 inch-pounds. Now this stator assembly has non-rotational rings. Non-rotational rings take O-rings underneath them. The ones that do rotate, if you're using that kind of stator, which I suggest updating to this one, you'll use these. These are a lot thicker than the non-rotational rings. Do be careful, do not break them. I got tons of them if I do. Just like that. Install a thrust washer shim and install a new pump O-ring. At this point I'm going to take and lubricate the bushing and the stator. I'm going to take and lubricate the seals on the side. Oops, I missed that. Lightly lubricate that O-ring. We'll install it into the case. Rotate just a little bit. It lines up with the splines. There we go. Just like that. Alright, before we put the lockup O-ring on, take all your bell housing bolts, 15mm, zip them down. Little rough thread there. Torquing down to 52 foot-pounds. Frank, I don't have anything this morning. Lock up O-ring. This out of the way. Lock it in. I'm going to recheck and re-verify. 2.6. Low reverse. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 5 R. 4, 5, 6. We're going to drive on the slip yoke sleeve, and I can see the marking where it needs to be. Clean everything off. It looks like right back where it needs to be. Alright, the extension housing has an O-ring seal. We're going to install that next. Then the housing, and then I typically put the output shaft seal on last. The orange side up. These bolts are typically just tightened down with a gun. Alright, the output shaft seal has a weep hole always towards the bottom and an ID mark that goes towards the top. Make sure this is straight. Started sideways just a little bit. Here, I'm gonna take an extension, go around and make sure it's going. Not just in the flat. The next thing is you take all the valves out of all the valve bodies, make sure you lay them out in a row where you need to have them. Take a bore brush, clean everything out, or bench buddy, put it all back together, clean everything up, make sure you vacuum test and follow the instructions for the zip kit. I've got a video on this already and what they are, identifying the parts and the components. Just be careful and pay attention. There are differences between 6L80, 6L90, and the ID bosses. That is, no, it's here, this section of the valve body. Alright, I've already got the zip kit installed, and there's a couple of pieces that I've not talked about with the zip kit that I started using recently, and this is the bag number 10. So these go on and press into these holes in this section of the valve body and go into this section of the case, into this passage sleeve. Put some check balls in first, and there's something else I've changed, or I'm adding, and Robert might like this one. Compensator feed. This is an 8-ball design. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Where's number 8? It's right here. There we go. Alright, let's start assembling the valve body. I'll take the separator plate over. Make sure they go down flush. We'll take the Tecum. There are 4 8mm bolts. The 2 long ones are going to go into this section right here. This is the heat sink side of the TCM. I'm going to start these down just first. Long 7mm bolts. There are short 7mm bolts and long 7mm bolts. Long 7mm bolts go on this side. All the bolts in the valve body are set to 72 inch-pounds, and these two and the shorter 8mm bolts for the speed sensors are 89 inch-pounds. I'm going to flip it over and install the short 7mm bolts.
Air filter was in front of me the whole time. It was still in the box. I thought you brought me a filter without the box, so I'm out here looking for a bare ass filter. So I open up the box. I'm like, oh. So I got it in my hand. Yeah, the brackets. That was all where you handed it. Yeah, I am. Okay. Let's see what.
We'll flip it back over and go to the 10. One here. Take and put the manual valve in. And install the IMS switch, your internal mode switch, part neutral safety switch, 10mm bolt there. Over, install the speed sensors. I'll start with the 7mm bolts first. Back to the 10. Same thing, 72 inch-pounds. Now with 8mm bolts, 89 inch-pounds, we'll back them off, let it readjust, and then retighten. Same to the speed sensors. Alright, center support seal differences. Take a note and look at the difference between the 6L45, 6L50, and 6L80 and 6L90. What we're going to be adding into this one is insert the short 0.2 250 thousandths of an inch Sonnax springs and the tall outer seals. No springs are required in the shorter middle seals. Do this all after installing the entire valve body assembly, or assembling it. Two tall springs. No springs in the center. This style will not using the ones with the ridge. You take them and drive them into the valve body. We verified that. Yep, you look here. These are the smooth ones go into the valve body section. The ones that go into the center supports, which is the early style. I don't see those anymore. Alright, with Transgel, the two large springs. I think that's a lot. Put them into the outside. Keep them in, keep them retained. Use not, want not. Passage sleeve seals, I always lubricate them before I install them into the valve body. Next, you need the E-Torx Plus 10mm socket for the 6 valve body to case bolts. Take and install. Line up the manual valve. We're all good and lined up square. Looks like we are. Two, three, 4, 5, 6. We're going to take the E-Torx Plus socket and torque those down to 72 inch-pounds. I see there's a deviation in information I've always used 72. Right, now the detent spring. Don't forget it. It is easily forgettable. Ask me how I know. And that is 106 inch-pounds. We're all lined up. Looks good there. Let's install the passage sleeve. Helps if I put the seals on it. 2 O-rings. 1 flat rigid seal. So into the case, there's an alignment notch here at the top, as well as inside the sleeve. If it don't go, don't force it. Lock it down. Install the filter. Pan gasket, pan bolt. Pretty self-explanatory. Seal it up. Turn tight, one over tight. Alright, those asking about the Sure Cool bypass kit. Take everything out of it. So take the E-clip or C-clip off of the inside, pull the guts out, throw them all in the trash. This is the blocking section, but it also has a blow-off valve ball and spring. O-ring side down. I've already installed the sleeve with the O-ring on the inside. Just read the instructions. It'll tell you everything that you need to know. You take the bypass apart, take the clip off, save it. Two new O-rings. Ball, spring, the small cone side down towards the ball, just like that. Push it together. Then we're going to take the retaining clip. I should have brought the bigger ones. It'll be fine. Just like that. Don't forget the O-rings that actually go to the cooler line section. One of them is still on the truck. Sometimes you may even have to Loctite the vent tube. It's loosey-goosey. Before you install the transmission, you need to flush the cooler. Always flush the cooler, especially with converter metal failure. You're going to put it right back into the transmission. Putting some cleaner stuff through it and blowing it with air, not going to get it all. $98 degrees. Okay. If it blows off that way. I'll do 2 quarts one way and 2 quarts the other. You get a flow rate. Just take and switch the lines. They're on. It's always a scary feeling with these things. Now let's check the flow rate. Usually hold it for 5 seconds. .7 gallons per minute at 110 degrees. And there's the code.